Imagine you wake up on a Tuesday morning in 2026. You reach for your phone, scroll through your notifications, and pass the usual noise of social media. Based on the updated National Defense Authorization Act, your status has been changed from civilian to active candidate for 50 years. And news alerts. You see an email from a government domain you haven't interacted with in years. Or perhaps more traditionally, you find a physical letter in your mailbox, printed on heavy official stationery. It doesn't ask for your opinion. It doesn't ask for a donation. It informs you that, based on the updated National Defense Authorization Act, your status has been changed from civilian to active candidate for 50 years. But what if the comfort you feel today is based on a calculation that has already expired? What if the red line has already been crossed in secret? The voluntary nature of the military is currently a mathematical impossibility. I will present 3 critical reasons why the Pentagon is secretly preparing: the total collapse of the recruitment pipeline, the return of industrial-scale attrition warfare, and the invisible legislative tripwires already laid into the law. By the end of this discussion, you will understand that the question is no longer if the draft will return, but how it has already been redesigned for the 21st century. Let's start with a terrifying reality. The American military is facing its worst recruitment crisis since 1973. Every branch is missing its targets by thousands. Is it a lack of patriotism? A woke culture? Or is it something far more systemic? We have to look at the recruitment desert of 2026. The pool of eligible young people has shrunk to its lowest point. Only 23% of Americans aged 17 to 24 are actually qualified to serve. Nearly 8 out of 10 young adults are legally or physically unfit to serve. If the military was a business, it would be declared insolvent today. Imagine a company that needs 10,000 people a year, but 90% are disqualified before they walk through the door. What does that company do? A military cannot simply shrink when its global commitments are expanding. The Pentagon has realized that the consumer model of the military has failed. The youth of today are more aware, more connected, and more skeptical. Why risk your life for a paycheck that won't even cover the cost of a house? Do you understand the psychological disconnect here? For 50 years, the military relied on a social contract, service for a path to the middle class. But as the middle class evaporates, that contract is being torn up. The Pentagon is staring into a future where the voluntary pool is non-existent. This is why they are looking at the draft. Not because they want to, but because the math leaves them no choice. If you cannot entice the population to join, you must compel them. Have you noticed the subtle changes in how the military is being marketed to high schoolers? Have you noticed the increased presence of recruiters in digital spaces like gaming and TikTok? These are the desperate gasps of a dying volunteer model. But there is a second, much darker reason why the draft is back on the table. It involves the very nature of modern conflict. For the last 20 years, we were told that the future of war was surgical. We were told about precision strikes and stealth drones. But in 2026, the red line has moved. We have returned to the era of great power competition. We are talking about peer-to-peer conflict. To understand why this changes everything, let's look at a historical analogy. Imagine a boxing match. In a counterinsurgency, the military is a world-class boxer fighting 1,000 gnats. But in a peer-to-peer conflict, the boxer is fighting another world-class boxer. Suddenly, you aren't worried about being annoyed. You are worried about being destroyed. To sustain a war against a major power, you need a deep reservoir of manpower. You need a population that can be mobilized at scale. In a high-intensity conflict, a modern battalion can be wiped out in hours. The missiles run out in weeks. The Pentagon knows the current force would be depleted in less than 90 days. This is the attrition trap. The elite have realized that our current military is a glass cannon. It hits incredibly hard, but it shatters upon the first real impact. Why is this important to you? Because it means the government's interest in your body has changed from optional to essential. They are no longer looking for the few, the proud. Are you familiar with the concept of strategic depth? In geography, it's the distance between the front line and the heart of a country. But in sociology, it's the distance between a peacetime society and a wartime mobilization. For 50 years, our strategic depth was massive. We were safe. But today the world is smaller. Hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare, and global supply chains have collapsed that distance. The Pentagon is realizing that they can no longer afford to have a civilian population that is disconnected. They need you to be ready, even if you don't know it yet. This brings us to the third and most invisible pillar, the legislative tripwires. Most people think there would need to be a massive public debate in Congress. But that is not how modern power works. Power works through the administrative state. It works through quiet amendments to existing laws. Have you looked at the recent updates to the Selective Service? Recently, there has been a push for automatic registration. They are removing the friction of the draft. Why would they do this if they weren't planning on using it? Why spend millions updating a system you intend to keep dormant? You don't buy a new engine for a car you plan to leave in the garage forever. And it's not just men anymore. There is a growing consensus that women must also be included. On the surface, it's about equality, but to the Pentagon, it's a simple matter of expanding the harvest. If the pool is shrinking, the easiest way to double it is to include the other 50%. They aren't doing this to be progressive. They are doing this to be practical. They need the numbers. Do you see the pattern emerging? The recruitment crisis creates the need, the new battlefield creates the scale, and the legislative updates create the mechanism. All three are being built simultaneously. But there is a final psychological layer, the normalization of war. Have you noticed how the rhetoric of national service is creeping back into the public discourse? Not just military service, but a mandatory year for all. It sounds noble, doesn't it? A way to bridge divides. But in sociology, this is pre-mobilization. It's the process of getting a population used to the idea that the state has a claim on their time and labor. Once you accept the idea that you owe the state a year, it is a very small step to accepting it during an emergency. The elite are testing the waters. They are seeing how much resistance they will face. The red line isn't just a metaphor. It is a mathematical reality where the interests of the empire exceed the capacity of its volunteers. We are standing on the edge of that line right now. The Pentagon is secretly preparing because they know that once the first shots are fired in a major global conflict, the voluntary era will end in an instant. They are preparing the scripts, the software, and the logistics to turn a civilian population into a military one overnight. And the most terrifying part? They are using your own digital footprint. In the 20th century, a draft was a blunt instrument, a random lottery. But in 2026, the Pentagon has moved toward what we call the precision draft. Why waste a software engineer in a trench when they can be in a cyber unit? Every time you search for a technical term or track your heart rate on a wearable device, you are unintentionally updating your dossier for the Department of Defense. This is the algorithmic draft. It is a system of total human capital management where the state no longer sees you as a person with dreams, but as a set of capabilities to be deployed for the preservation of the empire. In the past, the government spent months testing millions. Today, they can filter the entire population in seconds. They know who the pilots and coders are before the first notice even hits your server. Are you starting to see how the trap has been built around your own convenience? Why did we think that big data would only be used to sell us shoes or movies? But why is this happening specifically in 2026? To find the answer, we have to look toward the global balance sheet. We are living in a time of record-breaking national debt, soaring inflation, and an increasingly volatile labor market. In the history of economics, there is a concept called military Keynesianism. It's the idea that massive government spending on war can act as a powerful stimulant for a dying economy. To make military Keynesianism work, you need full employment. And the fastest way to achieve that in a collapsing economy, you take millions of young people out of the labor market and put them into uniform. The draft is an economic reset button. Factory assembly lines switching from consumer goods to shells and armored plates. This is the transition to a total war economy. Imagine a city running out of water. Instead of conservation, they flood it by breaking a dam. Suddenly, there's water, but everyone is drowning. That is the logic of a war economy. It solves stagnation by creating catastrophe. The draft is not just a military strategy, it's a tool for social control. How do you manage a divided population? You create an external enemy and a national emergency that requires total unity. The draft is the machine for social homogenization. It replaces individual rights with collective duty. You replace dissent with treason. The elite see the fabric tearing and use war to stitch it back together. Consider the normalization of sacrifice. Over the last few years, we've been conditioned to accept that our lives can be restricted for the greater good. This was nothing more than a dress rehearsal. The voluntary era was a brief 50-year holiday from reality. We are returning to the historical norm where the state owns the person. They are integrating the draft into the global intelligence grid. They are using predictive analytics to decide who is a political risk. Your child's school performance and medical records are being used to calculate their draft probability index. Nowhere to hide. Who benefits? Not the citizen. Only the architects of the permanently warring state. They see human lives as strategic resources. They have exhausted the credit, and now they are exhausting the population. The draft is the key that unlocks the door to the totalitarian state. Industrial conscription means the government can tell you where to work and what to produce. Every home becomes a military home. The Pentagon is only waiting for the event, the spark. The preparation is over. The activation is next. When the draft returns, it won't be a lottery. It will be an appointment, and they already have your address. Stay vigilant. Stay critical. Stay free. Because in the era of the draft, your mind is the only territory they haven't conquered yet. Will you be a character in their story, or will you write your own?